Hello everyone, and I hope you had a great 4th of July weekend. If you were the person responsible for buying groceries for the family cookout this year, there is a good chance you noticed something when you checked out. The total may have looked a little different than what you were used to seeing. Every year, the American Farm Bureau Federation puts together its annual survey looking at the cost of a traditional 4th of July cookout. They look at the foods most families expect to see at a summer barbecue: burgers, chicken, pork chops, side dishes, strawberries, lemonade, cookies, and of course, ice cream. The survey is based on a meal serving around 10 people, and the latest numbers are in. The cost of that cookout reached the highest level since the survey began in 2016. Now, it is important to look at this information carefully. The headline number does not tell the entire story. The Farm Bureau pointed out that the overall increase was around 4%, which is roughly consistent with broader inflation. So this is not some sudden overnight price explosion. But that does not mean we should ignore it. Because when you look closer at the individual categories, what went up, what stayed elevated, and what factors are driving those increases, you start to see a much bigger picture. The 4th of July cookout is more than just a holiday meal. It is a snapshot of what is happening throughout the food system. And some of those signals are pointing toward what grocery prices could look like later this year. According to the Farm Bureau survey, the average cost of a cookout for 10 people in 2026 was $73.82. That is an increase of about 2.90 cents from last year. At first glance, a 4% increase may not sound dramatic, but averages can hide important details. Some categories are moving much faster than others, and those are the categories that matter when you are planning your grocery budget. The biggest one continues to be beef. Ground beef has become one of the clearest examples of the pressure building in the food market. The survey found that 2 pounds of ground beef cost about $14.06, which is up around 5.5% compared to last year. That is the highest beef price ever recorded in the Farm Bureau Cookout survey. And remember, this is not just a one-year change. Back in 2020, those same 2 pounds of ground beef cost around $8.30. In 2022, it was around $9.40. In 2024, it was around $13.33. Now we are seeing prices move even higher. The reason is not a mystery. The United States cattle herd has fallen to its lowest level in about 75 years. Rebuilding a cattle herd is not something that can happen overnight. You cannot simply decide to increase supply and have millions of additional cattle available a few months later. It is a biological process. Cows have to be raised, bred, and brought into production. That takes years. The Farm Bureau itself acknowledged that rebuilding takes time, meaning consumers should continue expecting higher beef prices. Other analysts have also pointed to significant increases in hamburger prices compared with previous years. The exact percentage may vary depending on how the data is measured, but the message is the same. Beef is expensive, and there is no quick fix coming. This is not a temporary shortage that disappears next month. This is a supply problem that will take time to work through. And that matters, because when one protein becomes expensive, people naturally look for alternatives. That brings us to chicken and pork. Many people assume that if beef prices continue rising, they can simply switch to other meats and avoid the problem. But food markets are connected. Chicken and pork are also experiencing pressure. The more consumers move away from beef, the more demand can shift toward other proteins. Chicken prices increased, and pork prices also moved higher compared with previous years. It is not just meat that deserves attention, though. One of the more surprising categories in the Cookout survey was pork and beans. Pork and beans showed one of the largest percentage increases in the entire survey, rising around 13.8%. Now, why does that matter? Because canned goods are a major part of many household pantries. A can of pork and beans is not only about the ingredients inside. The final price is affected by processing, transportation, manufacturing, and packaging costs. Steel and aluminum costs, including tariff-related pressures, can eventually work their way through the supply chain and appear on store shelves. These increases do not always happen immediately. Manufacturers often absorb higher costs for a period of time, then eventually those costs make their way into retail prices. That is why canned goods deserve attention. Pork and beans may simply be one of the first examples showing those pressures. The same materials used to make that can are also used for countless other canned products: tomatoes, vegetables, soups, tuna, and other pantry staples. When packaging costs rise, those increases can eventually spread across the grocery store. Fresh produce also showed how weather events can quickly impact prices. Fresh strawberries increased significantly compared with the previous year. The reason was connected to weather problems, including damaging frost that affected supplies earlier in the season. This is something many consumers do not always think about. A weather event that happens months earlier can eventually show up on your grocery receipt. A frost in a growing region, a drought, or a major storm can create supply problems that appear later when products reach stores. The same idea applies to many other foods. A fertilizer shortage today can affect crop production months later. A cattle shortage today affects beef prices years later. The food system moves slowly, which means problems often appear after the original event has already been forgotten. Now, not everything increased. Some categories actually improved. Potato salad ingredients dropped significantly, largely because egg prices came down after egg supplies recovered from previous avian flu problems. That was welcome news for consumers. But it is also a reminder that food prices can change quickly. Egg prices fell because supply improved. However, poultry markets still carry risks, especially if another major disease outbreak affects production. This is why looking only at 1 month or one product can be misleading. The bigger question is what forces are shaping prices over time. When we look at the USDA food outlook for 2026, several categories stand out. Beef and veal remain under pressure. Fresh fruits and vegetables remain vulnerable to weather. Processed foods face higher production and packaging costs. Sugar and sweets are expected to remain elevated, which matters because sugar is a major ingredient in baking. For families that make cookies, pies, breads, and holiday desserts, those increases can become very noticeable later in the year. Coffee and other beverages are also facing continued pressure, and seafood prices remain another category to watch, especially for people who rely on canned tuna, salmon, or other shelf-stable proteins. The important thing to understand is that grocery inflation is not always about one single problem. It is often the result of many smaller pressures happening at the same time. Weather problems, supply shortages, higher transportation costs, higher packaging costs, changes in demand. All of these factors add up, and that is why preparing ahead can make such a difference. This is not about panic buying. It is about being intentional. If there are foods your family already eats regularly, buying some of those items ahead while prices are known can provide a financial advantage. Protein is one area where planning can help. If you regularly use ground beef, chicken, pork, or seafood, consider buying when you find a good sale and storing it properly. Freezing, vacuum sealing, or pressure canning are all options depending on what works best for your household. The goal is not to fill your home with things you will never use. The goal is to create a buffer. A few months of extra food can give you flexibility when prices rise. The same applies to pantry staples. Canned tomatoes, beans, vegetables, rice, pasta, flour, sugar, oats, and cooking oils are items many families use constantly. If you know you will need them, buying some earlier can help protect your budget from future increases. The best approach is usually gradual. You do not need to go out and spend hundreds of dollars in one shopping trip. Instead, add a few extra items each time you shop. A little today, a little next week, a little next month. Over time, those small purchases create a stronger pantry. The 4th of July cookout numbers are not a prediction that everything will suddenly become unaffordable. The Farm Bureau is correct that the overall increase is close to general inflation. But the details underneath that average tell an important story. Some categories are facing deeper challenges than others. Beef prices are being affected by a long-term supply issue. Canned goods are showing signs of higher production costs. Weather continues to create uncertainty for crops. and several food categories are expected to remain elevated throughout 2026. The biggest lesson is simple. The price you paid for your summer cookout is not necessarily the highest price you will see this year. It is a starting point. The choices you make now can determine how much those future increases affect your household. Preparing ahead is not about fear. It is about taking control where you can. Food prices will continue to change. Markets will continue to shift. Weather will continue to impact production. But having a stocked pantry, buying wisely, and planning ahead can give you something extremely valuable: options. So pay attention to the signals. Because sometimes a simple grocery receipt can tell you a lot about where things are headed. Stay safe, keep preparing, and keep building that pantry.